Welcome to another episode of Drive Talk Cars, and in today's episode we're going to finally prime and paint the bumper. If you've been following the other videos, then you know that we started off with showing you how to remove the bumper, disassemble it, get it prepped with body filler and sanding it down, and we're finally at the stage of priming and painting the bumper. So let's jump into the video. So the first thing we're going to do before we prime it is make sure that we have a clean surface. I have some prep solvent here that I'm going to use and wipe down the whole thing. And then after that, I'm going to use a Tach cloth just to get any residual dust off. I'm just using a clean microfiber cloth. And the reason why you want to use prep solvent versus like water or any other type of cleaning thing is because it dries very fast and it doesn't leave a residue behind. So just make sure you don't use anything that has like a wax or any type of oily substance to it. Alright, so anytime you're doing a paint job, you always want to have a Tach cloth. Tach cloth is basically a sticky cloth that you run against the surface, and that will pick up any loose dirt that was not picked up with your microfiber cloth or when you washed it off. You'd be surprised how much stuff is actually picked up. Alright, so once that's done, then you can go ahead and move to priming. Alright, so before you paint, you want to make sure you have a mask that is rated for painting and stuff like that. And you want to be in a ventilated area. Alright, so let's get started. As always, you always want to make sure that you shake the can for a full 2 to 3 minutes. When the ball is moving freely in the can, then you are good to go. Before you spray, you always want to do a test spray just to make sure everything is coming out good. This is optional, but you can use a handle or some kind of grip sprayer on the can if you want to. Alright, so let's get going. First coat is going to be a light dusting over the whole thing, just so you can get a coverage. I like to work in maybe 2 feet sections. Make sure you shake periodically to keep it flowing. So to wait between 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how warm it is outside for you. We're gonna do about 3 coats, I'm thinking, maybe more. We wanna make sure that we have a full coverage and that there's no spots that are peeking through on any part of the bumper. So after 5 to 10 minutes, we're gonna do a second coat. Between each spray, you want to make sure you clean off your nozzle. That way, when you go to do your second, third, fourth coat, you will have proper sprayage. Alright, so we're on our 3rd coat. It's looking pretty good. We starting to build the layers to where you can start to cover the underneath colors from the body filler. So we're going to see if the 3rd coat is enough. If not, we're going to do a 4th coat. And I'm thinking 4 should be the maximum number that we would need to get full coverage. So let's jump back into it. So the bumper is done now. We've primed it. It took about 5 coats. One reason was because I ran out of my original primer, so I had to get another one, and just to have a full coverage of the second color, I did 2 extra coats. But everything looks good. I'm gonna let this dry for 24 hours. You don't have to, but it's becoming the end of the day, so I'm just gonna call it quits and let it dry for 24 hours. Then I'm gonna wet sand it, and we'll go on to the next steps. So see you in 24. All right, so now that the primer has dried, the next thing to do is to apply a guide coat. And if you're not familiar with a guide coat, basically that is just a coat of paint that you put on. And it's not even paint, it's a special paint or coat that you put on to identify low spots when you are priming. That way you can get a very flat surface prior to putting on the paint. It comes in dry applications as well as spray applications. The spray is a lot cheaper and faster, but some people like the dry application. Maybe it's more thorough, not sure. But I'll be using the spray, and it's optional, but highly recommended. So you might be saying, well, why don't I just get a cheap spray can that's black color and just use that? So the guide coat is different than the paint because it dries faster, it dries differently, and it goes on differently than spray paint. Spray paint is gonna be a lot longer to dry, and it's gonna be thicker in its texture or in its consistency. So when you go to sand the spray paint off, it's gonna be a lot harder to take off than the guide coat. So get the guide coat. This is not that much, like 10 bucks. I have a link in the description down below if you want to get some of your own. All right, so I'm just going to hit it with the Tach cloth just to get any dust that may have settled prior to spraying on the guide coat. All right. So you're not trying to do a full cover, you're just going to mist it on so you can have enough on there to see. All right, so as you can see, it's just a light mist to get a little bit of coverage onto the primer. By doing this, this will give you the ability to see your low points. All right, you want to let it dry. It dries pretty fast. You can see it's dry. So what I'm gonna do is just sand it down, still using the crosshatch X, the X format. Then let's see what we have. I'm using the 320 grit sandpaper. So ideally what you're looking for is no low spots. You don't want to see any of this black stuff on your surface. So it should look like this, not this. If you have any spots that look like this, then that's a low spot. And you need to sand down or fill it up with some glazing or spot putty or some body filler and then reprime. If your body work is good, then you won't have any low spots or very few. And then you can just sand it down and then paint. This spot is really a good spot for the guide coat because we did body work here. So this will show how good your body work was. All right, so here's a good example of why the guide coat is so good. If you can see right here, there is a dark spot. So that means that that part is lower than the rest of the surface. So what you would have to do is sand it down until the dark spot is gone, or fill it up. All right, once you get your guide coat going and you got it sand down and everything looks good, then you can go ahead and either start painting or you can do a wet coat. I'm gonna do a wet coat just to get it all nice and smooth, and then I will proceed on to paint. Now when you wet sand, you don't have to go very hard with the pressure. You're just wiping it over it, make sure it's lubricated, and then that's it. Still going with the X pattern. right, so you want to do a final clean and wipe down. I'm just using water and a microfiber cloth. Using the prep solvent allows for you to make sure that your surface is clean of all contaminants. It dries up very fast and allows for you to get started a lot faster than just using water alone. Don't forget to use your Tach cloth after you've done your solvent. That gets everything off. Don't forget to wipe down in here. It's probably a good idea not to touch it as well with your raw hand because your hands have oils and different things of that nature. And I'm not scrubbing, I'm just rubbing lightly over the surface. So we are now at the point where we're about to paint the bumper. I'm using the product called Automotive Touch-Up. I have a link in the description down below to their site, but they're really good. I've used them before for a previous vehicle I had. Paint came out really good. You put your code in and they match it up and it's a really good match. So check them out. Like I said, link in the description below. But we're gonna use this and it's that time. Let's see what we get. Want to shake up, as always, shake it really good to make sure that the oil and the paint and all the mixtures are mixed up, and then you're good to go. All right, so we're gonna do a light dusting first. For this particular application or product, we're gonna wait 5 to 10 minutes in between coats, and then we're gonna hit it again. All right, so we applied our first coat. It's a light coat, nothing too major. You're still gonna see through it, of course. We're gonna wait 5-10 minutes, and then we're gonna come back and hit it with a second coat. And then we're just gonna stack. All right, as you can see there has been a mishap. The spray can splattered. So now I have 3 dots there that I have to fix. So things like this happen, but you can't get too upset, just have to fix it. And what I'm gonna do is sand it down and then apply another base coat. So I'm gonna try to use a 1000 grit sandpaper and just sand it down a little bit, and then we're gonna come back at it. Hopefully this works. Looks like it worked. Might be a little bit, but I think we're good. All right, so this is my 4th coat that I'm about to apply. This should be the last one. It's looking really good. Coverage looks to be very even. I had that one little mishap with the splats, but I think we got it good enough. And then after this, we have to wait 30 minutes before we can apply the clear coat. All right, so we applied the base coat. Everything looks amazing in my opinion. Had a few mishaps, a little splatter from the paint can, but after the 30-minute wait, we're gonna come back and we're gonna do the clear coat. All right, so we got the paint applied. It's dried for 30 minutes, I'm just gonna do a quick little run over with the tack cloth just to make sure nothing has settled on the paint. All right. All right, so now it's time for the clear coat. I'm using Automotive touch-up paint. Their clear coat is specially formulated to work in conjunction with their base coats. So that's why I chose it. I've used it before, it works pretty good. So it should be good and we're gonna see the results. All right, so this is the first coat. All right, so this is actually the second coat. Forgot to press record on the first coat, but here it is. So now we're finna do the second coat. So now it's starting to get that shiny effect. We're on our third coat. So I'm thinking probably around 4 to 5. All right, so we have the bumper clear coated now. So it has dried for over 24 hours. So now we're gonna go ahead and reassemble all the grills and pieces that we've taken out, the park sensors. Then once we have that all reassembled, we're gonna go ahead and put it back on the car. And then once it's on the car, I'm gonna go ahead and wet sand it and then buff it out. And that should be the final process. And we'll check out the results. So let's get into it. All right, so now we're just gonna put all these parts back onto the bumper. I'll probably do this off camera since we've already seen the disassemble. It's just the same thing, just in reverse. And then I will show it once it's on the car. All right, so the bumper's back on the car. As you can see, there's a difference in the color. That's expected. Usually when you have newer paint, it's gonna be slightly different than the old paint. There's a way to alleviate that. I won't be doing that in this video, but in the videos to come, I hopefully address that. And what you do is you paint the new paint on the old paint and gradually blend it into the existing paint. Like I said, I'm not gonna do that in this video, but I wanted to finish up with the wet sanding of this bumper and then buffing it out, and then we'll be done. So let's jump into it. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is wet sand. You want to get your sandpaper soaking wet. You can even soak it in a bowl of water, but we want to make sure that it is completely wet, as well as the surface. Using a 1500 grit sandpaper, we're just going to lightly go over the new part and remove any orange peel. I'm going to avoid the edges because they are definitely prone to peeling off too much. So I'm not applying any pressure, just enough to sand it down. And you want to make sure that it stays lubricated. You don't want to spend too much time in the same spot. And what you're doing is just removing the orange peel. should have a dull finish as you sand it down. Any of those dark spots that you see is still the orange peel, and you have to sand it down some more. All right, so now that we have the bumper all sanded down, what I'm gonna do now is buff it with rubbing compound that I got from Automotive touch-up paint. That's gonna bring the shine back, and we will see the results after this. So there you have it, we finally finished the bumper. It wasn't that hard, but it also wasn't that easy. Very detail oriented. So if you have the patience and you want to save some money, do it yourself. If not, take it to the body shop. But it's always a good experience to try new things and to see if you can do it. It's not that much money, but these are the results. We have a few things that we want to touch up as far as blending the fender with the bumper and maybe even the hood. But other than that, came out good in my opinion. And if you found value in this whole series or this video, please give me that thumbs up. That helps the channel tremendously. Remember, do it until you can't, and until next time, I'm out.